A lot of this, as you said, the timeline for how long people are going to be there depends on whether or not anybody's going to take them.
Right.
So it could be that some people are going to be there indefinitely.
You know, what's interesting to me is the previous administration knew who these people were that were committing these crimes. They knew where these folks that had final removal orders were in our country, could have negotiated agreements with these other countries to take them back home, and didn't. And we saw countries like Venezuela release their prisons and their mental health
what are you doing
individuals
now?
to come to the United States.
Are you comfortable that you're going to be able to not keep them there indefinitely?
I'm super thrilled that Secretary of State Rubio has been actively going out and negotiating, taking people home. So that's part of all the decisions on when we identify people in communities. As soon as we're able to go get them and return them back home as quickly as possible. So my goal is that people are not in these facilities for weeks and months. My goal is that there's a short-term stay. They're able to go incarcerate them, take them, follow the process, and get them back to their country.
That's your goal, but
yes.
You're not ruling out that they could be there for weeks.
I'm not going to rule that out, because we are going to continue to make sure that we're talking with every single country. But it's not an option for us to leave people here illegally anymore. American citizens have been put behind people who have chosen to come and break our laws, and that's not going to happen anymore.
You run a very big agency.
Yes.
Immigration is one of the parts of it, and FEMA is another. On X this morning, Elon Musk said, quote, FEMA is broken, and he said so in response to the suggestion that he shut down FEMA entirely. FEMA is, of course, funded by Congress, has repeatedly been authorized in statute, including by laws you voted for when you were in Congress. Can and should Donald Trump shut it down?
He can, and I believe that he will do that evaluation with his team, and he's talking about it, which I'm grateful for. He'll work with Congress, though, to make sure that it's done correctly and that we're still there to help folks who have a terrible disaster or crisis in their life. He's been very clear that he still believes there's a role for the federal government to come in and help people get back up on their feet. But there's a lot of fraud and waste and abuse out there. And since President Trump has taken over and come back into this administration, we've seen incredible changes.
What's your recommendation to him?
You know, he's talked a lot about doing block grants to states and to local officials. I was a governor, and when I was governor of South Dakota, we saw 12 different natural disasters that hit our state and that were FEMA related, that we had FEMA disasters. So I know it from that level, and I knew every single time that I and the local county emergency management directors, the mayors, the city councils, and the county commissioners, they made way better decisions than the people in Washington, D.C.
If the president came to you and said, you're my DHS secretary, do you think I should get rid of FEMA? Excuse me, get rid of FEMA, what would you say?
I would say yes, get rid of FEMA the way it exists today. We still need the resources and the funds and the finances to go to people that have these types of disasters like Hurricane Helene and the fires in California. But you need to let the local officials make the decisions on how that is deployed so it can be deployed much quicker, and we don't need this bureaucracy that's picking and choosing winners.
You mentioned Congress. USAID is an example, and there are others that I mentioned, that the Consumer Protection Bureau, that are also deemed by statute to be the law. They were put in place and kept in place by Congress.
And off mission. Unbelievable what USAID
But you're saying right here that Elon Musk and you are not just going to go in and say, we're getting rid of FEMA, you're going to do it with Congress?
Oh, the president has been clear, too, that he wants to still help people. But what happened by targeting individuals, helping some people and not others, listen, the president just in the last 5 days has closed 80% of the open cases in North Carolina. It's amazing when you have somebody who cares how quickly the response can be. And that wasn't the way that it was under the previous administration. There's people that had wildfires 7-8 years ago in the western United States still haven't received their FEMA payments. How are people supposed to pick up their...
I took a trip with the FEMA director.
Oh, you did?
She cared.
Well, what I appreciated about her, because when North Carolina got hit, South Dakota did as well. She did come. And I think showing up is a big portion of what needs to have happen.
I do want to ask a couple of quick questions. The Washington Post is reporting that Musk and his DOJ team have access to FEMA's sensitive disaster data, which includes personal information about tens of thousands of disaster victims. Have you authorized Elon Musk and his team to have access to Americans' personal data that is housed inside DHS?
Yeah, we're working with them at the president's direction to find what we can do to make our department much more efficient. So I think it's important. This is essentially an audit of the federal government, which is very powerful and needs to have happen. That agency, and one of the things I've been very clear to the appropriators in the Senate and the House is, please give me the authority to reprogram funds. There's
Right,
funds
but that's
that are
different
going.
from him having access to personal data that is housed
The
in
president has
agencies.
authorized him to have access.
And you
to
feel
that,
comfortable
so
with it?
absolutely.
I remember a time when Republicans were very careful about and worried about the government, particularly unelected people.
we can't trust our government anymore.
Having access to
That's our
personal data.
Yeah. Oh,
But
absolutely.
you are the government. now.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, is that the American people now are saying that we have had our personal information shared and out
But
there
now
in the
Elon
public.
Musk has access to it.
Yeah, but
He just said
Elon
he
Musk
does.
is part of the administration that is helping us identify where we can find savings and what we can do, and he has gone through the processes to make sure that he has the authority
you're totally
the president has
comfortable with
granted
it.
him. I am today by the work that he is doing by identifying waste, fraud, and abuse. And his information that he has is looking at programs, not focusing on personal data and information.
Not focusing on it, but he
No.
has access to it.
We'll be continuing to talk to him about what all he has access to. But this audit needs to happen to make sure that we are going through a process that adds integrity back into these programs. And people's personal information has been out there in these caseworks that have been closed for a long time, that people are getting responses now that they haven't had before.
Last question. DHS is the third largest cabinet department. How much do you want to shrink your workforce?
Well, we are going to go through that process. I think it needs to be shrunk and get these agencies back on mission. The bureaucracy is large. It's over 260,000 employees, and before, many of them weren't even showing up to work. Many of even the FEMA folks had the option if they wanted to show up for a disaster or not. That's not going to be the way it is anymore. So we're going to have them show up to work. We're going to start going through who is fulfilling their mission and who isn't, and be removing those that aren't committed to keeping America safe. The mission of DHS is to secure the American homeland. That's virtually every person who comes into this country and leaves this country, every product that comes into this country or leaves through our ports or other mechanisms, and also cybersecurity. So anything that happens on the internet and goes into the country or out of the country. So the jurisdiction of DHS is large, but I don't think that the number of people determines our success. It's how much they're committed to doing their job and doing it with excellence.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Appreciate it.